In Europe right now, there's a lot of talk about immigrants coming over and the chaos that it's causing and the disruption it's causing. And for the average person, if they would take the time to understand what's happening under the hood, they would see that maybe someone is a refugee, but they're not here because they're bad people. They're here because our governments, the European Central Bank, the IMF, they've caused so much disruption that someone who lives in a gorgeous place with sunshine and resources and family and roots is forced to leave in order to seek out opportunities, so to speak, more like animosity in a region that has no sunshine, that rains all the time. I mean, like, I wish that, especially in Europe, more people would learn about this and maybe protest and maybe, as a means of peaceful protest, learn about Bitcoin, start acquiring Bitcoin so that there are less resources available to governments that carry out these atrocities.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Bitcoin for Professionals. Today we have a special guest, Saidah Gomez. How are you doing today,
Hey,
Saidah?
I'm good. How are you, Ralph?
Doing good. Thank you so much. Where are you based?
I'm based in Geneva, Switzerland.
Wow, beautiful mountains. Are you a skier or a snowboarder by any chance?
Okay, so I wasn't when I first moved here because originally I'm from Toronto in Canada, or Toronto. I still have the accent. And I actually grew up skating. I think I did a few months of figure skating lessons, and we had a skating rink in the courtyard where I grew up and stuff. So I did a lot of skating. And then I moved here in 2008 and I had to learn how to ski.
Well, you had to, but still surprising. I mean, I lived in Montreal for
Oh,
10
nice.
years. Yeah, we just moved here a year ago, but maybe you can tell us a little bit. 'Cause it sounds like you've been all over the place between, North America and now Europe, but I'm curious to hear about your background. What did you do before you got into the Bitcoin space? What did your career look like? Your passions, your hobbies? Where did you spend your time?
I think that I am probably a jack of all trades. Um, so I grew up in Toronto. I went to school in Toronto. I did my undergrad in Toronto as well. My parents put me in French immersion, so I stuck with the learning French track. And in my third year of university, I decided to move to France for a year as a student to learn and truly immerse myself in French culture. So there were only two of us, two Canadians. And so they sort of lumped us together with the Erasmus program. So we were with a bunch of people from the UK, so England and Ireland. And then from there, I was like, whoa, all of the things that I had seen about France and read in books and magazines, especially with regards to fashion and food. Some of it was true. Oh, you know what? I don't think my microphone is recording properly. Is
I
that better?
no, we can hear you fine.
That's okay, good. Sorry about that.
No worries at all.
But some of it was true, but there was so much where I was like, they didn't tell us this. So it was truly a year of exploration and sort of like me starting to break out of the matrix and stuff. And so that sort of like whet my appetite for, I guess, my future of just traveling and exploring and living in different places and being comfortable with kind of being an outsider who has the privilege of sort of looking into different cultures to see how things really work.
Wow, that's so interesting. I mean, I'm just curious because from Montreal, there's two types of French. There's the Quebec French and there's the French French. Were you trained in Quebec French? I'm sure if you were, it might have been a bit awkward in France.
Uh, you know this so well. So we had teachers because I think there may have been a shortage of French speaking teachers in Ontario and in Toronto. So we had teachers from like Cornwall, which is on the border with Quebec, Ontario and
Mm.
Quebec, from Belgium, from France, I think we had a few teachers from Quebec as well. And so I didn't know it at the time, but I was learning sort of like a mishmash of French with different expressions and sort of like different cultural insights that went into the language. And so I didn't realize, but language is more than just the words we pronounce. There's a whole cultural, like the meaning and the subtext is quite deep. And so when I went to France, I remember it was I was with a bunch of friends and I saw a pair of shoes and I was like, oh, j'adore les souliers. And one guy looked at me, he was like, what did you say, soulier? Like, who are you? What century are we living in? And I was like, okay. So it was a mishmash. And now, like between France and Switzerland, because my husband is French, my in-laws are French, my daughter has a French passport, but I see the difference between some of the terms and expressions used in Geneva compared to France in Normandy, in Paris, or just people who live across the border.
Yeah, it's similar in the Middle East. I mean, everyone reads and speaks Arabic, but the way
Yeah.
the context changes is super fascinating. I mean, you go somewhere and then you think like, yeah, I'll just fit in, and then all of a sudden people are looking at you and you're using these words like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
okay, you mentioned that at one point during your background description, you started to unplug from the matrix. I want to pick on that a little bit. So, when you say unplug from the matrix, what are we talking about here?
So specifically, a lot of it had to do with media. So growing up in North America, obviously we had a television at home. I don't have a TV anymore. News reports and stuff. I find that even if I may say as a Black woman, like a lot of the depictions that I saw didn't at all reflect my background, the values that my parents instilled in me. The image of France and Europe being such a grand place, you know, that was cemented in my brain because that's all I was exposed to. And so when I actually traveled there and I saw, you know, people with like dreadlocks listening to reggae or, I was like, this is not, Jean-Paul Gaultier, fall, winter, I saw normal people. It is true that there is, I think, a deeper respect for food and a deeper respect to preserve like certain cultural institutions, but they're just normal people like us all, and there are problems, and the grass is not necessarily greener in Europe compared to Toronto, although there are a lot of things that I prefer here. And so I started to understand that perhaps what was being projected onto us wasn't necessarily reality. It's sort of like a constructed reality that whomever was doing the projection wanted to put out there for reasons that are, beyond my knowledge.
Wow, so you were early to the fake news revelation. And yeah, and the more you travel, right, the more you're exposed and the more you see reality for what it is. It's
Yeah,
normal people. Yes, some of them clinging on to their cultural heritage, but others just integrating or sharing their cultural experience. So it's not as clear cut as they would like you to think, right? And similar to us from the GCC region, I'm sure from a Western lens, people look at the GCC, the Middle East, and they're like terrified. Oh my God, it's unsafe. But if you just look quickly on YouTube, some of the nicest places to visit are actually in the Middle East by top travel,
yeah,
critique. So it's crazy. So that was kind of where you started to question things.
definitely. And
What?
then,
Yeah,
oh,
go on.
sorry, go
No,
ahead.
no, go ahead. I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, so I was going to say then, I graduated from school and stuff, and it was my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, his company moved him to Switzerland. And I was like, what's in Switzerland? Like, I want to go to Paris. Like, again, still thinking, like, anyways. So we came here, and I started working in the oil and gas industry. And it was a very, very lucky opportunity because I don't have oil and gas training. I didn't go to school for petroleum engineering or anything like that. And I started to work in the industry. And to my like huge surprise and good fortune, I worked in drilling. So actually, like drilling for oil, which afforded me the opportunity to go to Gabon in West Africa. I visited Erbil as well. in Iraq, and I actually got to go well site. I sat down with a well site geologist who explained the whole process to me, the cuttings that are coming up in the well that tells the story of the well. I got to spend time with like local people, and it was mind blowing because before that, I was always in an office behind a desk, not touching anything tangible, not very sure of what I'm producing, what my contribution is to the world. And so when I actually got to be on site, I was like, oh, this is what it's about. Like here, a commodity is being produced. Here is where value is being extracted from the earth and being used in order to, give people energy to create additional value. And that was also a pivotal moment for me. And I have to say that I felt a little bit incompetent and insignificant because I was like, oh, this is the real deal. Like all of the corporate political stuff is just, it's very self-serving, whereas this actually contributes to something that's bigger than the individual.
Yeah, and first of all, good on you. I haven't heard anyone teaching themselves the oil and gas industry. So
I
it's
was
like
lucky. I had a really good boss, really,
yeah,
really
but
good.
that's fascinating. I mean, still, I think it's more of an internal thing. Yes, you can be mentored, but I mean, with no formal training, no experience, and you just get thrown into it, that's amazing. One, and second of all, I can see your point because I guess you're working in a commodity industry and you get to see the real practical output that's coming out of it
Hmm.
versus, building a presentation and then sharing it with your boss and then your boss shares it with his boss and then you can't there's no connection between, the consumer and the producer basically. And in
Hmm.
oil and gas, I can see how, you're playing a part. I'm providing electricity, I'm providing energy for communities all over the world. Even if you don't see those communities, you're still
Yeah.
that's amazing. But oh, wow, I mean, and I'm assuming, and correct if I'm mistaken, was that kind of something that triggered your interest in Bitcoin?
It really laid the foundation because I didn't know about Bitcoin at the time, but that experience was so memorable that it was one of those things that just was shelved in my brain that stayed with me for, I mean, till this day. And you can imagine that fast forward a few years when I learn about Bitcoin, I go back and I pitch. I'm like, hey, you know, the debates in production about whether to flare gas or not, perhaps this is the solution, And so it definitely contributed to my understanding of Bitcoin. And actually, I think it was in 2017, there's a company based out of Canada called Upstream Data, and Steve Babour, I hope I'm not slaughtering his name, but he also worked in oil and gas, and he did a presentation on YouTube that I still go back to from time to time, explaining just how, Bitcoin can capture that flared gas. And he did an excellent presentation. And I remember showing that to my husband because we had been discussing for quite some time about how it's possible to harness energy that can't otherwise be used using Bitcoin. And my husband was like, "Well, why doesn't every company do that? Like, why is it only special to Bitcoin?" And so the whole decentralization aspect of things, the whole, like there are leaks if you try to like pipe the gas off, all of that came to evidence watching Steve's presentation. And so I was like, okay, like I'm not the only one kind of thinking this way. There are other people as well. And I don't even know this person, and he's talking about it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And how would you define your because that sounds clearly like a aha moment where you connected your past experience, energy, gas, and then you connected Bitcoin, like, oh my God, this could change everything. And I'm sure you got a lot of, pushback when it came to, yeah, but Bitcoin's bad for the environment. It's consuming more energy than nation states. I'm wondering if that's something, because you have the background, you can quickly debunk those things because you understand the oil and gas industry. But are those conversations common in your circle when you're talking about,
Yeah. Yeah. So oil and gas represents like one aspect of my story, if you will.
Mm,
Um, so then I went back to business school, and this was in 2016. And as part of it, like it's a good business school, we had three sort of discovery expeditions, they called them. We went to Silicon Valley, we went to India, and we went to China, Beijing and Shanghai. And the first expedition in Silicon Valley, we were representing a company here in Switzerland that specializes in 5D scanning. I'm not sure what it does now.
mm,
And so at the time, so this is like 2016, the question was, what do we do once we've digitized, these Picassos, for example?
mm,
In Geneva, we have what's called I think it's, what is les Paul Francs or something like that. It's like a zone where people can store their valuables, but
mm.
they're not technically onshore, so the tax treatment is different.
Okay.
And so we went to Silicon Valley, and the whole point was to pitch to venture capitalists, describe what the business model is, what's the value proposition to high net worth customers who have these pieces of art and who are storing their value in these pieces of art. And someone mentioned blockchain. And there was one guy in the group from Prague who said, he was like, that's not what blockchain is for, and he had such a strong and visceral response that caught my attention, but I didn't follow up on it because we had a lot of stuff to do. So fast forward, I think it was like maybe the beginning of 2017, my father, who is slash was a gold bug, told me that I should start watching the Kaiser Report with Max and Stacey Herbert. And I started to watch them, and I was shocked that they were so forthcoming about central banking and what's happening. I was in disbelief. I was like, they're not allowed to like tell the truth kind of thing. And from there, I started to really fall down the Bitcoin rabbit hole because they had on so many guests and so many, I guess,
Mm.
influential people within the Bitcoin space.
Wow, that's fascinating. Again, more travel. I
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
can't get enough of it. But quick question on that topic. So when people talk a lot about central banking, I'm curious, have you looked into, and I'm the creature from Jekyll Island?
So that's still on my reading list. I remember, I think it was Greg Foss, maybe in 2021, saying that you absolutely have to read that book. And there was another one released recently by Nomi Prinz, I think, where she talks about banking as well. So it's still on my list of books to read.
It's brutal.
Is it really?
First of all, it's really big, very dense. It's old, and he takes a few tangents around secret societies because it's about how the central bank was created from day
Hmm.
one. And you read that book, that was one of the triggers for me, where I couldn't, get enough Bitcoin content, learning about Austrian economics. And I was a previous banker. My entire career, I worked in TradFi. I worked on foreign exchange desks, managing FX reserve for banks. I worked on a brokerage, trading a variety of financial instruments. And I ended up my career the last 7 years in institutional asset management. So working with double, triple PhD CFAs that were building portfolios. But by that
Yeah,
time, I was already in Bitcoin and I was outperforming every single one of them. And these guys were,
right.
I
Did you
always,
tell did you tell them, or did you like sort of keep that to yourself?
I couldn't really mention it. First of all, because I was in the institutional asset management space, anyone that lived in the like my wife had to give up her financial statements and all her brokerage account details to the regulator. I was highly regulated. So
Oh,
I had
wow.
to bring a lot of attention.
Yeah.
I would sometimes mention like, "Oh, have you seen Bitcoin?" just to kind of test the waters. And every single time, the reaction was like so bad and so negative, like it's a Ponzi scheme. I've even seen in a pitch deck uh, for a conference where they use Bitcoin's chart crashing down to make a point.
Hmm.
Versus, where we are today, I'm sure a lot of these folks are, still it takes a lot of and I'd like to get on that point from your side. On a personal level, it took me a lot of unlearning to do. like a lot of concept ideas I had, because of my formal training, my career, similar to what you said. I was fed these things. I
Yeah.
never questioned the economics behind the system because they only teach you Keynesian economics. No one talks about Austrian economics. But
Yeah.
on that note, has Bitcoin, because now I'm assuming we reached a threshold where you've transitioned into Bitcoin. Uh,
Yeah.
let's kick it off real fast before we get into what you currently do. What has Bitcoin done to you, to your family? Has it changed you on a personal level? A lot of people come to the show and they say, Bitcoin changed me. Now I'm a calisthenics addict. I take care of my health.
Yeah.
I think long term. I'm curious about what it's done for you and your family.
So for my family, I would say that it's provided us with security because it's been some time now. And my husband was reluctant initially, but through a lot of discussion and stuff, he's like, okay, obviously I believe you, manage everything. And for me personally, I would say that, so I mentioned that my dad was a bit of a gold bug. So I think that I was raised in a very sort of low time preference mindset. I remember my dad used to say, Sai, there's nothing wrong with being frugal. Like he always sort of emphasize the importance of savings. So from that perspective, not much has changed. The only thing that's really changed is the vehicle that I use to save in. And I mean, especially when I moved to Geneva, I really got caught up in, buying shares in different companies and stuff. I got burned. I realized that I had no clue what the company was actually doing. Even reading through the financial statements, you don't know what they're doing and stuff. So I realized that, information asymmetry is a very, 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 very real thing. And I'm learning to keep my mouth shut, ironically, a bit more. Because when like felt confident in talking about Bitcoin to other people, I was all over the place. I tried to orange pill former colleagues. I know as well a few bankers here, with influence, and I tried to speak to them about it, and they shut me down completely. And the nature of our relationship really changed. It was like cordial and friendly, and then it turned into something not so good and stuff. And so I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is to build myself up, build my family up, make sure that we're secure. And when someone is interested, then I start to speak, as opposed to my like previous way. Maybe it's a North American thing, you find something that's really good or a good deal and you just tell everyone about it. I find that European French speakers don't take well to that at all. Like there's still sort of this hierarchical
Mm.
mindset that's in place that kind of prevents curiosity. And if you don't have sort of like a title or influence or the ability to pull them up in some way that is obvious to them, they won't necessarily listen to what you have to say.
Yeah, the expert bias is real,
Hmm.
especially in
Yeah.
Europe, even in Canada, compared
Yeah.
to the US. But I love that. I mean, I totally agree. And you're not the first guest on the show that says, yeah, I just stopped trying to orange pill people. When they're ready, they know I'm the Bitcoin person and they'll come.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that trend. I mean, I used to be like you. I used to be like, no, I'm on a mission. We need people to real, but everyone has their own pace, is what I've learned.
Yeah.
And you can just gently plant a seed and just leave it at
Hmm.
that. But, like you said, hurting your relationships is not worth it. And at the end, you want them to be comfortable to come back and ask you about it when they're ready versus
Yeah.
pride getting in the way. But anyways, let's jump into what you are doing now. I know that it's been one full year of Bitcoin
Yeah.
content creation. First of all, congratulations to that.
Thank you.
How does that feel? How did you start? Why did you start? And what has surprised you the most about building a voice in this space?
Okay, so what surprised me the most is that people actually listen. That for me is like it's very humbling, and it's that surprised me the most. And I had my daughter in 2019, and I started to do consulting in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I studied that as well, like after business school at Cornell University. Because I really thought that some of the issues we were seeing were because of, I don't know, lack of representation or whatever you want to say. I still didn't understand fully that a lot of these issues within companies is they're downstream of money. The money is broken, and so,
Mm.
maybe DEI was a band-aid or whatever. Anyways, so I did a bit of that. And then I started to, after the COVID sort of hysteria started to fade, I started to organize Bitcoin meetups here in Geneva. So I did that for about a year or maybe a bit more. And my husband travels a lot for work. My daughter's getting bigger. Her schedule is getting more full. Getting a babysitter all the time wasn't necessarily feasible. And so I decided to start a podcast, Ask a Bitcoiner 21 Questions. And like you mentioned earlier, there's so many podcasts in the Bitcoin space, which is fantastic because more and more people can hear about Bitcoin. But I thought, how do I differentiate myself? And I used to listen to hip hop, I still do. And I thought of 21 Questions, which is a song by 50 Cent. And I was like, hey, ask a Bitcoiner 21 questions. And so I started building, but I was really nervous. And I've never been big on branding or anything like that. So it was challenging for me to like conceptualize and put something out there, some kind of imagery. But luckily, because I'd collaborated with other people in the Bitcoin space earlier, I started to get guests pretty easily to come on the show and stuff, and it's just building from there.
Yeah, I mean, I love that concept. Is it kind of like something that, you perceived before, or you just wanted to speak about Bitcoin? You needed to get it out, basically. You needed to talk to people about Bitcoin. Is that kind of, because for me, that's kind of a driver. It's like we both agree talking to people randomly at a bar or over dinner is just not working. And so I love that. That's
I
amazing.
mean, like at the meetup, it was cool because we would speak about so many different things.
Yeah.
My husband, he said on a number of occasions, please stop. We were at a friend's house. I'll never forget this. And there were like a group of us there. And one guy approached me. He's like, at work, my boss keeps talking about Bitcoin. Can you explain this to me? And so we went to the side. We were sitting on at a table. I gave him an overview and he's like, yeah, but how do I buy it? So there's an app here in Switzerland called Relay. I
Yes.
downloaded the app for him. I said, write down your seed phrase. Don't show it to me. Write it down. I'm going to turn around in your corner. Do not lose it. Do not start with a huge sum. Buy like maybe 100 francs worth or whatever. I walked him through all the steps and the price was relatively low at that time. He's happy today, obviously. But the host, he looked at us and he was like, don't talk about Bitcoin in my house. You're not allowed to talk about Bitcoin around
Really?
us. And at first I thought he was joking, but he was dead serious. He works in insurance. And I was like, oh, okay. And that really like it impacted our relationship, the rapport we had. And I didn't realize that it was such a serious thing and stuff. And so I thought, yeah, a podcast is better because at least my guests willingly they want to come on and talk about Bitcoin and like, we can do zaps and stuff. We could like message on
Yeah.
Noster and it's like non-threatening.
Oh man, that's a crazy story. Wow. But yeah, that sounds amazing. Love the show, love the concept. I'm glad you're sharing your voice with other Bitcoiners because your story is fascinating. Recently, if I recall, you released a BitAxe unboxing video. Uh,
Yeah.
so for me, given your background, your understanding, and your interest in mining and how Bitcoin works, I wanted to get your thoughts on the whole, home mining and mining in general. Like, what are your thoughts about it?
Well, I think it's great, obviously. I think that, the role of mining really acts as like a security function. And I do think that, if you look at the top mining pools right now, there is a bit of centralization that is happening. Whether that's an actual threat to Bitcoin, I don't know. I don't know if we do risk like a 51% attack or like a 30, what is it, 30? I think you only need like 32% or 31% of the network hashing power to like actually launch an attack. But I think that for the individual to have a bidax and just to experiment with home mining, you're probably not going to find a block, but it is such a great way to learn about Bitcoin from another perspective. I think today a lot of people come in and they expect, oh, we're going to 10x from here. It's the moon. But this is a practical way. I did a course like a long time ago through the EDX platform. It was the University of California, Berkeley, and it was just about Bitcoin. And it went through the technical aspect of mining and the different attacks and orphan blocks and stuff. And it can seem very abstract if you just, follow an online course. Whereas if you have a bidax, if you have something, you can just plug it in, you can get going. And then with time, you can work on, which is something that I'm going to do,
Mm.
building your own like block templates so you can see Bitcoin from a different perspective and you can just experiment from a more like technical perspective as well.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I mean, I'm a big fan of solo miners. I mean,
Yeah,
it would be great if everyone had one at home or multiple.
yeah,
And
yeah.
you never know, is what I
Yeah,
say.
it's true. It's true. You never know.
I
You
mean, it
never
would be
know.
the best feeling ever because sometimes you do see these solo miners, come up with a block. I don't know what their equipment looks like. It's probably not a bit solo miner, but hey, you never know. The odds are still
Yeah.
there, and you're still participating in the network in some form of way. I mean, if 8 billion people had a solo miner at home, I'm sure it would make a small dent, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's similar to how we encourage people to run their node. I get it though.
exactly.
A lot of
Yeah.
people struggle with the complexities. Mining can be scary, especially when you look at, the industrial grade mining that's happening. It
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
crazy. Have
Yeah.
you been to an actual mining farm?
I have not been to a mining farm. I would like to though.
Yeah,
I
I
would
mean,
like one of my former colleagues to like, set one up on a rig. Hello.
you should give us their contact. We'll tag them and we'll
Yeah,
we'll clip
I
this.
won't. Yeah, that would be nice, but
Yeah, I want to jump into one area. So in the past, you've spoken about monetary colonialism,
yeah.
especially in Africa with the CFA system. A lot of people, sadly, in the world don't even know what that is, what it looks like, and what it causes, basically. I personally have my opinion about it, which is pure enslavement, if you ask me. I mean, it's just brutal
Yeah.
in every sense, and the fact that you can't be sovereign over your money is so problematic, right? That's why we're
And
Bitcoin.
over your resources. Yeah.
So maybe you can give us a little high-level description of what that is, what it's doing to the continent and the countries impacted by it. And I'm sure you're going to slide in at some point how Bitcoin can help.
Yeah. Um, so basically, a high level overview is I think it's, what is it, 12 countries now? Things are changing. In West Africa, they use the CFA franc. The name of that currency, it's always been the initial CFA, but what the acronym actually means has changed, and I think it changed again recently. But essentially, if you're in Senegal, for example, and you want to sell a natural resource to a buyer in China, for example, even though you have your own currency and in China there's the renminbi, you still have to go through the euro. France still steps in to say yes or no to the exchange of your resource for money. And your CFA goes through the euro system, which then gets converted to the renminbi. And the opposite is also true. So essentially, what that means is that if you live in one of these countries, you cannot buy and sell freely. It is not a free market to you. And so, strategically speaking, if there is a resource or if there's some kind of deal that you would like to do that doesn't suit France or Europe, you cannot do that. And so, it is a type of enslavement. And it's funny because I came about this in a very roundabout, unexpected way. When I was studying in France, and then when I moved to Geneva, where there are a lot of French people would ask me, they're like, "Oh, are you from Senegal? Are you Pearl? Are you from Mali, and these are countries that I knew very little about, so I started to research them. And I also noticed that with the question came sort of a pejorative type of approach, like, "Oh, you're probably a refugee, you came here with no money and whatever." And I'd be like, "No, actually, I'm from Scarborough. Like, I mean, I'm from Toronto. Like, why is this happening?" And it's all linked to the money. And so after a while, I went through a phase of like, oh, they're interested, like, so you tell me more about Senegal. And they'd look at me like, why are you asking me to tell you about your country, kind of thing. And then it went, my reaction would be like, why do you keep like harping on what my origins are? I don't understand why you keep telling me about my origins and like why you keep insisting that I'm poor. Like, you don't know me, get to know me as an individual. And then I thought, I'm tired of like having this conversation. What's really going on? And I did the deep dive to understand. And I thought, wow, I mean, in Europe right now, there's a lot of talk about immigrants coming over and, the chaos that it's causing and the disruption it's causing. And for the average person, a regular person, if they would take the time to understand what's happening under the hood, they would see that, maybe someone is a refugee, but they're not here because they're bad people. They're here because our governments, the European Central Bank, the IMF, like Alex Gladstein has so many articles on this, they've caused so much disruption that someone who lives in a gorgeous place with sunshine and resources and family and roots, centuries of roots, is forced to leave in order to seek out opportunities, so to speak, more like animosity in a region that has no sunshine, that rains all the time. I mean, like, and so yeah, so I'm grateful for that personal experience. And I just, yeah, I wish that especially in Europe, more people would learn about this and maybe protest and maybe, as a means of peaceful protest, learn about Bitcoin, start acquiring Bitcoin so that there are less resources available to governments that, just carry out these atrocities.
Yeah, it's a form of abuse. There's no other way to put it. I mean, uh, even from first principles, these are sovereign nations. It makes
They
no
should be. Yeah.
exact. It should be, but they're being uh, through the financial system imprisoned and enslaved.
Hmm.
It's a roundabout way to maintain control.
Exactly.
Basically, they look sovereign, but they're not because their money isn't sovereign. So I really hope people wake up to that. And I can totally relate, at least on our side as Lebanese. There's more Lebanese outside of Lebanon, way more.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
in Lebanon. I'm sure you've bumped into plenty of Lebanese everywhere you've went. There's a lot of them in Geneva too. And
Yeah.
all of them had to leave, like you said, to find opportunities because the system keeps collapsing every few years. And now
Yeah.
so it is. It's tough, and I hope things turn around and people wake up. And I think slowly, I'm optimistic. Bitcoin seems to be finding its way to people's heart, and I think they find it in the worst kind of way, which is just through price appreciation. But
Yeah.
when you buy something, you get curious about it and you learn
Yeah.
about it. So I think yes, Bitcoin's price appreciation is the best form of marketing. We can all do our part, but I think a lot of people that will be the first step into Bitcoin. And you just hope that once they get in, they find your voice and then they learn more about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that and for enlightening us on that. I wanted to ask you about, you know, institutional adoption, like 2024 ETFs, Bitcoin goes
Yeah.
mainstream. 2025, we're talking about potentially sovereign nations. I mean, the UAE, one of their sovereign wealth fund, already purchased 500 million worth of the IBIT ETF. That's the
Okay.
disclosed amount. They are really ahead of the game, and I'm not surprised if they're holding spot Bitcoin somewhere. They're just waiting for the US government to start buying before they announce that they've been buying for
Yeah.
3 years. So it's just a strategical sovereign game theory playing out. But at the institutional level, we had a lot of positive. The new accounting rules now allow companies to mark Bitcoin at fair value, which is great. There's a lot of hesitation there. Why do you think not more companies are following the MicroStrategy playbook, the Meta Planet, Similar Scientific, you name it? I'm just curious on your thoughts.
So publicly traded companies or private companies?
So more on the public side.
On the public side, I would say that things have evolved to a point where, without even wanting to be, everyone is super high time preference. So, your publicly traded company, you have to prepare your quarterly reports. Quarterly. We're not like this is very, very, very short term. And because, the money is what it is, your return on shareholder value is not what it needs to be. You're not clearing the hurdle rate. And so, if you, in one on one sort of interactions with executives or decision makers who can push to adopt Bitcoin, that individual is thinking, like, okay, if the price tanks in the next few months, that could be my job on the line, my reputation. I want my child to go to college. I want to buy a new home. I have this mortgage, my car is leased. And so on the sort of micro level, I find that the time horizon doesn't necessarily line up. I think that, privately held companies and individuals finally, like, we're really lucky because finally the rules are in our favor. For a long time, up until Bitcoin, the rules were stacked in favor of like all of these publicly traded companies. They had a lot of, yeah, they had access to capital markets. And so for, privately held companies and for individuals, we don't have to adhere to those rules and we can actually take a risk and have, you don't have like this, board of directors necessarily that you need to report to. And you can actually, take a small risk. How is this working out? And you can increase your allocation. And fast forward almost 10 years, you are outperforming all of them. And so I think that maybe within the publicly held, like in that sphere, maybe if a bunch of companies sort of tank at the same time, like if everyone finds themselves at more or less the same level where shareholders who are investing in the equity market don't have much wiggle room, maybe that's an opportunity for everyone to start making an allocation to Bitcoin, and we can see things change from there. But I think it's just a mismatch of incentives and time horizons.
Yeah, it reminds me in the corporate world where I used to work in, and from your experience, it's like you couldn't, deviate too far from the trend or, the middle, because then that could become problematic and, like
Yeah,
you said, has cascading effect. But I think, we're turning a page, it seems, because
yeah,
there's more of us entering into the workforce. So there's more vocal conversations happening at that level. It's going to take a few years, I think. And in the
yeah,
future, I think we won't hear any more uh, Bitcoin treasury companies. It's just going to be companies. The same way
yeah,
with internet companies or tech companies. Now it's just
yeah.
companies. So I love that. We're almost at the mark, but we're going to do something that you are extremely familiar with.
Oh,
Uh,
what's that?
we're not going to do 21 questions. We're going to do 5 questions. So
Oh, okay.
so the tables have
Starting to
turned. Look
compete.
at you getting ready for that. Okay. Question one. One book or article that changed your view of money or power.
The Bitcoin standard.
Nice. I love to hear that. Two, one Bitcoin tool or experience everyone should try.
Home mining, BitX.
Nice. Three, one myth about Bitcoin you'd love to never hear again.
It's bad for the environment.
And
Oh my God, there's another one though.
yes, go ahead.
It's not inclusive.
Okay, nice. Four, one question you wish people would stop asking.
Uh, my podcast is Ask a Bitcoiner 21 Questions. How hypocritical would I be if I were to say that? I don't know. Pass.
Okay, five, last one. One question you love asking Bitcoiners.
What's your origin story?
Amazing. Yeah, that's my favorite question. And
Yeah.
that's a wrap. I mean, Saida, thank you so much. This was great. Please, where can people find you? Where can they consume what you're working on? Everything's going to be in the description, but I'm gonna give you like 20 seconds, 25 seconds. Take your time if you need it. Help us out. Where can people find you?
So you can find me on Noster, if you're on Noster, at Saidah. If you just do Saidah, Saidah, in the search, you'll find me. You can find me on X as well. My handle is at Ask a Bitcoiner 21. You can go to the YouTube channel, which is Ask a Bitcoiner 21 Questions. I have a presence on Instagram and TikTok, but I'm not very active there. And then if you want to be on the podcast as a pleb or a Bitcoiner, you can send me an email at askabitcoiner21questions at gmail.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We'll make sure to include all
Oh,
those
thank you.
details. It was really a pleasure talking to you.
It was nice being here. Thank you so much, Ralph.